Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game. So today we're going to continue the series on the MiSTer FPGA DE10 Nano project, and it's been 48 hours since we talked about the Nintendo 64 core, so you know there's been a lot of improvements and a lot of new games that are working better. In pretty much every video, you guys asked me to keep retesting the WWF and WCW wrestling games, and the newest core fixes so many of them. We're going to be doing just that. Sliding right into WWF No Mercy, this is one of the better games on the system, and the Nintendo 64 had some awesome wrestling games, so it's no surprise at all that you guys always want to see these. Now before, there was definitely issues with the intro, and the entire menu system was basically completely missing. If you could blindly navigate into a match, you would have a good time, but actually getting there was a bit of an issue. But recently, Robert at FPGAZumSpass updated the core, and he called it the wrestling update, because it does allow us to see basically every single menu in every single game. For some reason, The Rock's name is missing there, but otherwise, WWF No Mercy seems to be working exactly as you would expect. And this was a great generation for wrestling games, and that's why I know you guys keep requesting these things. This was an awesome generation for wrestling as well. I mean, I haven't watched it in over 20 years, but I remember being in high school and all this was going on, and it was a big deal back then, so I'm sure you have the same nostalgia for it as I do. But tell me down below if you were watching wrestling back then. I would be curious. I assume most of you were, because you always ask me about these games. But if you want to play them on the current core, I tested all of them. I'm only showing 3 in this video. But all of the WWF and WCW games I tested had improvements in the menu and the overall performance, which is awesome to see because these are going to be great for game nights and everything like that. You'll see here as we're in the menu, you can see every little bit of text. This used to be basically completely missing, so actually picking the match you wanted and getting in game was difficult, but once you got into the game, things started working better, and that's what you do see here. And these are the type of improvements you're going to expect moving forward. So many games on the core currently work. It's like 85% of the North American games will now get into game, so we're more into the bug fixing territory outside of TLB. Each core is going to improve something slightly, and today's core was all of the wrestling games, and that's just so much fun to see that we're at that stage already where there's just bug fixing going in to make things work that didn't used to work before. Because like I said, you could 100% get into WWF No Mercy, you just couldn't see anything you were selecting, so trying to get a particular match like the ladder match here was basically impossible unless you had a photographic memory. Now, totally possible. Now you guys wanted to see more Nintendo 64 DD games, so this is Doshin the Giant 2. Now be fully aware, there's absolutely no way to figure out what's going on in this game whatsoever. Big thanks to Andy D for grabbing this capture. I did the wrestling, he did Doshin. But honestly, it's still fun to see this working on the MiSTer core. These are ROM hacks, which means that they've taken the Nintendo 64 DD games and patched them to run on things like EverDrives, which means we can play it here. There is no DD implementation in the core. Maybe towards the end, if there's logic available, it might be added, but it's definitely one of those far-reaching things that is not really seemingly in the cards. But I've always wanted to check out the Doshin the Giant games, even though I really have no idea what's going on, so I definitely will be playing these on the core just to get an experience. And I will say right now, if you actually want 64 DD hardware, it is massively expensive these days. It is only the domain of the collector who has more money than common sense, and I get accused of that a lot, but I have enough common sense not to buy a DD. But if any of you out there actually have DD hardware, tell me down below. I would be curious. It's one of those things, I always want to do a video on it, but I never actually want to buy it. Because honestly, the library is paper thin, and even though games like Doshin the Giant 2 here do seem to have a lot of fun things going on, trying to actually figure out what the hell's happening at any given moment in time seems to be impossible. So it's been one of those things, I've never actually sought out the hardware, and I probably never will. But you can play the majority of 64 DD games on the current core, and that's just fun to see from a historical standpoint, to be able to check out what Nintendo was doing, because the DD was supposed to be their big revelation, and it ended up not being. But let's move on to another game in the wrestling genre, WCW vs NWO Nitro. This is another classic wrestling game on the Nintendo 64, and again, as you can see here, we're getting all of the text and all of the menus. Last time I showed you this game, you had to blindly select your character just based on the model that appeared on screen. Now we have every single name of the wrestler back then, and I forgot that Hulk Hogan had his Hollywood Hulk Hogan era during NWO. Such a weird storyline. They were just really grasping at straws back then, I felt like, but it kind of worked. But hey, nobody ever accused wrestling of having good writers, but from the gameplay to the graphics to the menu to the sound, everything just seems to be working here. So go ahead and listen to the music and sound effects for like 45 seconds, but come back because I got more games that work than ever used to, and games with improvements that are here today. But enjoy. mean, it's not the best soundtrack on the Nintendo 64, but it sounds good here, and the sound quality in the core for the most part just seems to be 100%. It's been a long time since I did a capture in which the sound had some sort of issue, so it seems like for most games that I have played for the channel, any sort of sound issue is basically something that is in the past. But if you hear anything there you don't like, let me know down below, because I'm not an audiophile, and I always say if I'm going to miss a problem, it's going to be in the audio department. But again, this game is just a classic. I remember playing this so much in high school with my friends because of course it was great for multiplayer, and seeing it again here is absolutely fun. And these are actually games I don't have in my collection because I haven't played them in forever. Sure, I've emulated them, but honestly now I kind of want to pick up a couple original cartridges for these. But with the MiSTer FPGA core, I can kind of just play these, and that is the best part. The core is getting to the point where now if I want to play a game like Bomberman Hero, I'm going to end up picking up my MiSTer versus my original hardware, and that is so fun to see and say. But moving on to more games that started working that didn't recently is South Park Rally. Now unfortunately this is both good news and bad news. The good news is we have another working game for the Nintendo 64 core. The bad news is it's South Park Rally. All jokes aside, this game just really isn't that good. Of all the options for racing games we have on the Nintendo 64, both kind of kart-based as well as regular arcade racers, South Park Rally is definitely at the bottom of the list in pretty much every department. It is fun to see the world of South Park in 3D because obviously it's still on TV and it was huge back in the 90s, but this is just a game that is more confusing than it is fun. You have this open world checkpoint system, you can navigate around whichever way you want to go. What that actually ends up doing is basically you racing in empty roads while you have no idea where the other characters actually are unless you take a look at the map. Stuff like Mario Kart 64 and Diddy Kong Racing do such a better job at this genre because it actually lets you just race on a course where there's not multiple different directions you could go at any given time. That's just kind of the down part of South Park Rally. It doesn't really know what to do with the racing formula, so you basically end up getting a little bit confused, and if you find an opponent, you feel pretty lucky. But on the good side of things, this was a game that didn't used to work and recently has been added to the now working list, and that is always fun to see. Not every single game on the Nintendo 64 is a 10 out of 10 banger. It definitely had its shovelware just like every other platform, but I remember the previews for this game back in the day and everyone was so excited because South Park was absolutely huge on television, and we really didn't get a good South Park game on Nintendo 64 whatsoever, but they do exist. And if there's other games you want me to test that I haven't shown yet on the channel, leave me a comment down below, and if they work I'll definitely get around to them, because if this didn't get added to the recently playable list, it's definitely not something I would have actually featured on the channel. So if there's a game that you love that I haven't mentioned yet, do tell me down below. But I mean, South Park Rally works, the graphics look great, the music sounds good, it's just not that fun, which is the unfortunate part of it. But if it's a game you have a lot of nostalgia for, you can 100% load it up on the current core today and start playing, and that's always a good thing, even though Cartman here 100% lost. Now moving on to other games that have seen improvements in the recent core, NBA Jam 99, and it's also a great thing that this has seen improvements on the menu structure, but it's also a little bit of a bummer just because NBA Jam kept getting worse as a franchise as the series went on. But at least we still have the Utah Jazz, and at least we still have John Stockton, the GOAT of the NBA. I always make that joke, but it's always fun to make. And this is another game that didn't used to work, then went to working with menu issues, and now all of those menu issues have been resolved just like they have been on the wrestling side. And I know a lot of people probably do have nostalgia for this game, and that's why I'm featuring it here, not just because the menu looks better, but because this was a popular game back in the day. I still love the 16-bit era of NBA Jam the best, but this wasn't a bad game. It was totally competent as far as a basketball game was concerned. It just lost a lot of the charm of what NBA Jam used to be. It's way more like a traditional basketball game in most spots than it would be anything else, but it works, the menus are great, the performance is good, and this does have some voice samples as well to kind of give you a sense of the compression on the Nintendo 64 and how they sound. So go ahead and listen just for like 25 seconds, but don't go anywhere because I still have more stuff that works to show you.
Out of there. He passes. He dishes it off. He spins. He shoots. It rims out. He takes the shot in your face.
In your face.
Here's the jumper. He really threaded the needle on that one.
When he hits his jumper from that spot, it usually spells trouble.
With the inbound pass.
Sounds good to my ears, and honestly with NBA Jam 99, it's been so long since I played it, I don't know if anything is incorrect, but from the gameplay to the menus to the sound, everything seems to be good here, so it's 100% a game you can check out today. Now moving on to things I never would have thought about, and big thanks to Andy D for doing this capture as well. He decided to try to load up ScummVM and Day of the Tentacle on the Nintendo 64 to see if it would work. If you asked me if it would work, I would have 100% guessed no, but as he double clicks onto Day of the Tentacle here, you actually can load up this classic LucasArts adventure point and click game, and it works on the Nintendo 64 core, which is just absolutely mind-blowing. A Nintendo 64 recreated in FPGA is running a DOS emulator to play games that used to be for DOS on Nintendo 64 hardware. It's like 7 or 8 different levels of inception as far as impressiveness are concerned, and this is just something I never would have expected to see. I kind of forgot completely that ScummVM was even ported to the Nintendo 64 in the first place, but if you want to play another game on the current core, one that never actually came out on the Nintendo 64, you can play Day of the Tentacle, and that just doesn't seem like it should be possible, but it's possible on real hardware, and the core is doing so well, it's also possible in FPGA. And if for some reason you've never played Day of the Tentacle, you definitely have to check it out. Even if you've never played a point-and-click adventure game before in the past, if you're going to start one place, this is a great place to start and check them out. But this also has full voice acting that is working on the core in ScummVM, so go ahead and listen just for like 35 seconds, but I still have even more games to show you that just work, but enjoy this because the dialogue is quite good.
Laverne, how'd you get upstairs?
Am I upstairs? I got lost.
Seen any tentacles?
What's a tentacle?
Oh, just something I whipped up in my spare time. Made good pets, actually, until one of them tried to take over the world. Had to tie the little buggers up in the basement.
Good thing you told us that.
Yeah, Bernard wanted us to set them free.
Thank God you weren't that stupid.
I mean, honestly, for the era, that's incredibly good voice acting, and the sound quality sounds good as well, because don't forget, this was still the DOS era of games. But again, I just never expected to see anything like ScummVM running on the Nintendo 64 or the Nintendo 64 core, but Andy D definitely thought outside the box and was able to get this capture over to me. So if this is something you want to do, you can do it today, but it is such an impressive feat. This requires basically great precision as far as the code is concerned, because it is a port of different code, which means that if it's running on the Nintendo 64 core, that is a very good sign at just how good this core is shaping up to be. But honestly, I don't think anyone is really surprised about that. Robert's been absolutely nailing this. You can even save in ScummVM. I'm not sure if the save persists, I'd have to ask about that, but it's just wild to see. And of course, we have one more wrestling game, because you guys have asked to take a look at Warzone again, and this is another game that's 100% improved over the last time we saw it. Every single menu now works. You can select your match, you can select your wrestler, you actually get to see things, and it seems like one fix was able to bring a lot of these different games online. Now this one's definitely not the best wrestling game on the system by far, but for some reason it is one of the games that I get the most requests for. So if you want to see Goldust and Ahmed wrestle here, you can totally do that. But that's the fun thing about these core updates. Sometimes one little fix brings like 5 or 6 things to life. Pretty much every single wrestling game had no menu whatsoever, and that is because most of these games are developed by the same couple of companies. So if you see an issue in one game, chances are you might see that exact same issue in 2 or 3 other ones, because every company and developer basically did quasi the same thing when they made games. They'd get comfortable coding in a certain way, so the next time they made a game, they'd kind of go back on that work and do it in the same manner. That's why you see games like the wrestling games made by the same developers having these same issues across games. But the good thing is today that seems to be 100% patched up, and all of the WWF and WCW wrestling games are just completely playable on the core. You can play by yourself, you can play with friends, but however you do, you definitely should check them out if you haven't in a long time, because pretty much all of them are at least okay, and some of them are some of the best wrestling games of all time. But that's what I got for you on the update front this time. If there's a game that I haven't tested yet that you want to see, leave me a comment down below. Of course, I'm going to keep updating these as new cores come out, but we're really getting into the bug fix territory here on most of the North American library outside of that TLB virtual memory utilization system. And you never know, that might be coming soon. I've got no idea whatsoever. I just have a feeling in my bones. Short of that, thanks so much for watching, guys. Leave me those requests down below, but if you haven't played Nintendo 64 or MiSTer yet and you have a MiSTer, I think it's about time you started. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.